Greetings, fellow freethinkers. The event you're about to watch was hosted by the Centre for Inquiry Ontario, an educational and outreach organization dedicated to promoting and defending science, reason, and free inquiry in every area of human endeavor. My name is Justin Trottier, and as Executive Director of CFI Ontario, I would like to take a minute to tell you about us. Our centre, located in the heart of downtown Toronto, is the first Canadian branch of CFI and is our nation's first dedicated meeting and event space for humanists and freethinkers. Our mandate encompasses a robust public education presentation series throughout Ontario, campus outreach as we support a growing network of student freethought groups, community outreach and social services to provide humanistic alternatives to religiously monopolized services and activities, and a lending library and media center that, among other things, broadcasts videos like this across the planet. To learn more, please visit us at cfiontario.org. To get on our email list or to learn how you can support our movement or get a freethought group started at your campus, simply contact us today at info@cfiontario.org. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the video.
Paul Kurtz. I'd like to say just a few words on behalf of the Centre for Inquiry Ontario. This is a very exciting period. We're entering sort of what I call phase 2 in our development, where with the almost 100% guarantee that we're going to be getting our charitable status. It isn't quite assured yet, but our lawyers do tell us that that is more or less almost a guarantee by the end of the year. We're looking to really lay the groundwork to make our sort of position here sustainable so that we can look into expanding our programming and perhaps even expanding our presence throughout Canada. So I'm going to tell you a few words about what we actually do here at Centre for Inquiry Ontario. For those of you who might be new, might have some questions. I think on that table over there, you can pick up these brochures. These green brochures just go into detail about our programming here at CFI Ontario, as well as throughout our transnational operations. Very quickly, there are 5 main areas that we are interested in. One is programming. So looking at our mission, which is promoting and advancing reason, science, and free inquiry in all areas of human endeavor, we do major events such as tonight's event, conferences, educational panels, discussions, and debates. Secondly, we host campus outreach. Sort of my favorite part of what I do here, the campus outreach. I think it's very important to promote freedom of thought and humanistic secular values on the campuses in universities and colleges. If you look at the map to the left, to your left, that is sort of an idea of the Canadian free thought movement and how we're expanding from our home base here in Toronto. It shows about 18 campus groups. They're the ones in blue, I believe, and a number of other off-campus humanist groups. All the campus groups, with the exception of about 2, were founded by and kept sustainable by our operations here at CFI Ontario, so we're quite proud of that. If you are associated with university, do come talk to myself or some of the other volunteers to learn how you can get involved at the campus level. We also do community and social services. So this can include things like our secular sobriety support group, our religion support group, our English as a second language, community outreach initiative, and others. So I do encourage you to talk to our staff about how you can get involved in those groups. We also host a library, a lending library of over 1,000 books, which are behind you, and a small media center where we produce videos, such as tonight's event, and many, many others. We put them up on YouTube and on our website as well. So if you haven't been to any of our events, or if you've missed a few, do check the website and peruse our video selection. And finally, CFI Ontario is the first ever humanist drop-in center and community space for humanists and freethinkers, open about 8 hours a day. So that's kind of just a run-through of what we do, and again, you can read all about that in this brochure. I also want to say a few words quickly about our upcoming events, and I'll remind you about these at the end of the evening as well. We have 2 more events coming up this month. Not to toot my own horn, but I'll be speaking next week at York University on the new atheism in Canada, subtitled, Should the New Hardline Approach to Atheist Advocacy Be Applied in Our Country? So this is looking at the political, social scene in Canada and talking about whether a sort of Hitchens and Dawkins style of atheist advocacy is appropriate, from my point of view at least, as sort of an activist in Canada. And I'll be doing the same talk, or a similar talk, here on the 14th of December. On next Wednesday, we have Professor Lawrence Moran, a U of T professor in evolution, who will be talking about evolution as a fact and a theory, and talking a bit about the myths surrounding evolutionary theory. It will also be the launch of our Cafe Inquiry project, which is going to be more or less every month we'll be doing a talk or a panel dealing with something to do with sort of science and free thought. It'll be co-hosted with the U of Toronto Secular Alliance. And actually we have Andrew, say hi Andrew, who's with our U of T group, and he can tell you more about Cafe Inquiry and other projects especially if you are affiliated with U of T. I do encourage you to speak to him. Other events that we have planned include Think or Sink with Henry Beazle, a philosopher and an ethicist out at Carleton University, if you hail from the Ottawa region. We have James Alcock, a skeptic from York University, who will be joining us in January. We have Stuart Kaufman on the lineup for the spring term as well, I guess the winter term, in February, speaking about evolution and complexity theory. So really a great jam-packed lineup of science speakers and free thinkers and humanists. So we do encourage you to join as a friend of the center, join our Friend of the Center program. It's $60 for general admission, $20 for students. We do encourage you to join this to show your support and also to get into all these events for free. We will be having a major event once a week, be it a lecture or a film screening or a book club. So that's all I'm going to say about that. You can check our website for more information. If you are interested in joining the Friend of the Center program, I'll identify John right over there, who is sort of our Friend of the Center sort of committee chair, if you will, and he can answer your questions about why you should sort of support what we're doing here by joining that program. I'll also mention, I mentioned that we're launching our development campaign. We had a kickoff meeting on Monday where we had about 8 or 9 people here who have now pledged to form our development advisory board. And through their generous donations, as well as donations leading up till now, we've raised $21.7 thousand towards the first year of our development campaign. Thank you for support that. Our mission is to raise about $100,000 a year for the next 3 years consecutively. So we do have Brian Stavert, who's running our development campaign or involved in that, who has some forms if you'd like to pledge some money. We're accepting any amount, and we're encouraging you to pledge over a 3-year period. It does make it easier to make a larger commitment. And again, that is what we're counting on to make our home base here sustainable and to move on and expand our programming. If you're not able to commit monetary support at this time, but you would like to be kept abreast of our plans, you can simply sign your name up. That's free of charge, of course, and get on our mailing list. Even if you think you're on the mailing list, you may not be. So we encourage you to sign up. There are multiple CFI mailing lists. So just to be safe, if you're not sure that you're getting the weekly emails from CFI Ontario, it's always safe to put your name down there. We can just cross-check and make sure that you're already on the list. The last thing that I wanted to mention before I introduce our speaker is our political initiative. Alongside the programming and the other areas that we're involved in, we also do political advocacy. We were very involved in the One School System Network. This was a coalition of religious and secular civil liberty associations pledged to bring an end to government-funded religious schooling, namely the Catholic separate school system. That issue has not died. It's more alive than ever, really. And we do have a petition on that table there. If you support our position on this, we encourage you to sign that petition and encourage others to do so. Also, we've released a press release defending Philip Pullman's great His Dark Materials trilogy. If you haven't heard about this, they were pulled off the shelves of 2 Catholic school boards because the author is an atheist. We feel books should not be pulled down for that reason or many other reasons, as you can imagine. So we've written a very strong press release supporting reinstating those books, and we encourage you to support our campaign in defense of those books in all schools. There are sheets also on that table which include our press release and also very simple ways you can support what we do. A quick letter to the editor or a quick phone call registering your outrage at what's happening. So do take advantage of that. And I promise this really is the last thing I'm going to say before I introduce Dr. Kurtz, which is that we have food and beverages for sale at the back, water, pop, etc., some snack as well. And if you are interested in taking advantage of that, I think we'll have a short intermission before the Q&A and also after at the end of the event. So you can go to the back and get what you'd like. I'm going to introduce our speaker now. Dr. Paul Kurtz is Professor Emeritus of Philosophy at the State University of New York at Buffalo. He's also the chairman of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, formerly SciCoP, the Council for Secular Humanism, and Prometheus Books, and he's editor-in-chief of Free Inquiry magazine. On top of all of that, he is founder and chairman of the Center for Inquiry Transnational. Dr. Kurtz is considered by many as one of the founders of modern humanism, and is largely credited with the secularization of humanism. As a strong believer that religious skepticism is not enough in our movement, Dr. Kurtz coined the term eupraxsophy, meaning good practice and wisdom, to refer to a worldview based on living an ethical and exuberant life, relying on rationality rather than revelation. Dr. Kurtz is a former co-president of the International Humanist and Ethical Union, from which he received the International Humanist Award in 1999. He's a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and Humanist Laureate and President of the International Academy of Humanism. He's the author or editor of 45 books, some of which are here on sale today, and over 800 articles and reviews. He has appeared on many major TV and radio programs in North America and worldwide. Kurtz is the publisher of over 650 articles or reviews and has authored and edited over 40 books, I mentioned. Dr. Kurtz is the founder and driving force behind the expansion of the Center for Inquiry, having long desired to spread the institutionalization of secular humanism and skepticism throughout the world. He has for many years desired such an outpost in our city of Toronto, and it's a great pleasure to be working alongside him at this exciting branch here in front of you. So with that, I'd like for you to join me in welcoming our distinguished speaker of the evening, Dr. Paul Kurtz.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you for the great job you have done in building this center. And thanks also especially to George Baker and Don Cullen, who for at least a decade have been coming down to Amherst, which had been known as the safest town in America. City above 100,000 population, now it's only number 4, fallen down, and trying to get us to come to Canada and help found a Center for Inquiry. This is a Canadian center, it's not an American center, but we're very pleased to have the new Center for Inquiry, and very pleased to see many people that I know. How many people read the Skeptical Inquirer here? Okay, a goodly number. How many people read Free Inquiry magazine? Also a goodly number. So we do have, and have had, thousands of readers over the years throughout Canada. What is the Center for Inquiry? It's committed to science, reason, and free inquiry in every area of human interest, and it also focuses on the need for secularism, a secular society, and the development of humanist ethical values based upon science and reason. Does that sound radical? No, it seems eminently important, and we've been attempting to found centers all over the world. Now, we are a coalition. Is that not high enough? Okay, okay. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. Now, we are a coalition, a federation. We include the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, now shortened because the paranormal has been declining a bit, but is still there, to the Committee for Scientific Inquiry, for the Council for Secular Humanism. We include the American Rationalists. We include Africans for Humanism, SOS, which means an organization for secular organizations for sobriety, Prometheus Books, the largest free thought publishing company in the world, and many more. Today, we find the emergence of anti-scientific attitudes, even in this wonderful country, Canada, especially in that unbenighted province beneath us, the United States. I say that because I was introduced to 2 people who recently escaped from the United States and settled in Canada, and invited me to consider coming to Canada. My wife is French. She's a French citizen. At the moment she's in Paris, and my children are bilingual. So we are international citoyens du monde, and that's very important to point out. And so we're attempting to develop a new transnational, we call it, beyond national frontiers. Now, would you put on the first slide, and let me introduce Nathan Bupp. Would you please stand up, Nathan? He's our Vice President for Communications and Public Relations, and he's assisting me with that machine. But you see, here's a story of Americans going back, escaping to England, where they're fleeing religious orthodoxy in the United States, and we feel that way. And we're very apologetic, incidentally, at what is happening in the United States today. Many consider it to be a great tragedy. And everywhere I go, I find people so critical of the developments in our country. Now I cannot see my notes. I need to put on my glasses. I'm an octogenarian, you know, and there are two things that I need: glasses and hearing aids. And I found out I can do without much less sex. Not too much less, but I can't do without hearing aids and glasses. Did you hear the news tonight that there was a fire in the presidential library? Have you heard that in the United States? Yes. The president's 2 books were burned. And he was particularly disturbed because he hadn't finished his coloring book. Charlie Rangel, who I like very much, a New York representative, said that after Bush, one should never talk about white supremacy. I've just returned from a meeting, and I see some of you were there, at the New York Academy of Sciences. We work closely with that organization, which is on the 40th floor of the first new building over 9/11, that tragic event that happened in the name of God. And the theme was the secular society and its enemies. A very inspiring meeting. And one thing that came out of that, these are very serious times, and I want you to remember 5 religious truths. First, Muslims do not recognize Jews as God's chosen people. Jews do not recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Protestants do not recognize the Pope as the leader of the Christian world, and Baptists do not recognize each other at Hooters. Well, now, yes, serious business. We are founding centers for inquiry. We think we need a new enlightenment in the world. The great enlightenment of the 18th century was limited to Europe, and now it has to be carried transnational. And the purpose of the Center for Inquiry is, maybe you want to make that lower just for a moment. Can you put the light down? You can see that? Yeah. The purpose of the Center for Inquiry is to encourage a new enlightenment. We need to develop a new grassroots movement in this world, a movement that must fill a vacuum. Today, as we travel around the world, you have the great religions of the past. You have Islam, Hinduism, Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox Judaism, evangelical Protestantism, everywhere contesting our point of view, and the mass media, in one sense, selling the sensational, the paranormal, and the occult. And although we have fine schools and fine museums, and a part of the public scientifically literate, nonetheless, we have a long way to go in conveying to the general public an understanding of science and an appreciation of what it is. And this is the purpose of the Center for Inquiry. Now, there are 10 centers in various processes of formation in North America. This great center in Ontario, and we're very thrilled that it has gotten off and that we think it has a great future. We have centers in the transnational headquarters is in Amherst, New York. How many people have visited us in Amherst? Okay, thank you very much. For those of you who have not, please come down. You may have to spend 3 or 4 hours on the bridge, but pick a time when you can get through quickly. We have a center in Los Angeles, yes, in Hollywood, California, a magnificent building that we put up. We rent offices. We had offices in Rockefeller Center, and we considered buying that building, but after we heard it was $1 billion, it was a little bit beyond our reach. So we do lease headquarters. We're attempting to buy a building in New York. We have a CFI in Florida and Tampa for the whole state. In Washington, D.C., we opened a new lobby. And the Washington Post, when we did this, it was a year ago, Nathan, right? They said, think tank wants to emphasize thinking. And we made great progress in the last year, where we focus on 2 things, secularism and the integrity of science. And also we're contesting in the various courts of the United States, all the way up to the Supreme Court, many of the jurisdictions of that reactionary court. If there is one more appointee of a conservative, then the Bill of Rights and the entire Constitution is up for reinterpretation. So we hope that Justice Stevens lives at least until next year, where hopefully there'll be a change in administrations. We have a Center for Inquiry in Indiana, in Austin, Texas, of course in Toronto, and in progress centers in San Francisco and Chicago. And the thing that most thrills us is that there could be, in North America, 100 centers. The people in Vancouver would like us to create a center. We have people all over the country saying, yes, we need to convey the scientific method, the scientific outlook, moral values that are appropriate to the 21st century and beyond. For example, this great battle over stem cell research, based upon a theological moral doctrine that the soul is implanted at the moment of conception, that has prohibited scientists in the United States calling on federal funds to get new embryonic tissue in order to do that. Now, the recent development that you can clone from part of the skin is an important breakthrough, but that may not be sufficient. And we issued, in fact, a press release only 2 days ago. Was it 2 days ago? Yes, okay. On that point, that the possible discoveries on the frontiers of biogenetic engineering are so enormous for humankind that how can they be prohibited by the Vatican's doctrine that the soul occurs at the moment of conception? It makes no sense. That's a profound anti-scientific attitude. And so we have a center in Germany which emphasizes mainly skepticism. Now, I met the executive director of the Skeptics of Ontario. That organization I helped to found, I should point out, I think in 1977 with Jim Alcock and others, Henry Gordon, and I'm glad to see it's still going, though I wish they would meet here and with other people who share this commitment to the scientific outlook. The German Center focuses primarily, we have a nice building in Germany, they focus primarily on skepticism of the paranormal, alternative medicine, and other fields. We have a center in France, the University of Nice, a center in Poland, a center in Russia. The head of the center in Russia, Professor Valery Kuvakin, is now visiting in Amherst as a distinguished fellow, and he couldn't get a visa to come into Canada. Not that he would be denied, but you had to be down at the consulate very early every morning, and by the time he got there it was closed, so he couldn't make it to Canada this time. We have centers in many, many countries. Now, I'm particularly thrilled with the centers in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, but also in Uganda and Kenya, and the great need for people in those countries. They've been invaded by missionaries for centuries, by slavers who captured people and brought them to the other countries. And now there are corporations, but no one is defending scientific naturalism and humanistic values. And we're saying to the people in Africa, yes, you take your destiny in your own hands, develop your rational capacity, lead a full life. And they find that to be wonderful, not to depend on others, but to raise themselves by their bootstraps. So the African, there are 60 humanist groups in Africa. There was only one 20 years ago. Similarly, in China, yes, I just returned from Beijing. Now, what is today? Today is Friday. I guess 10 days ago I returned from China, from Beijing. We had a World Congress in China. We have a new Center for Inquiry in Beijing. We have an entire floor dedicated to the Center for Inquiry. And on the way back, we stopped off at Shanghai, and they're in the process of creating a Center for Inquiry. They're committed to science and technology as the #1 priority. And they've been talking about human rights, as we have been talking about, democracy, as we've been talking about, and the hope that in time China will democratize and allow human rights. But also, it is a point of view that they find very, very important. Now, tonight someone said to me, well, the trouble with the Center for Inquiry is it's too atheistic. A skeptical friend said, it's atheistic. And I want to make that point clear. We are not to be defined simply by atheism. Many or most people are atheists within our movement, or non-theists, or agnostics, or skeptical of religious claims. And if we were to only be defined by the new atheism, much as we appreciate the breakthrough, and much as the fact that most of the authors of those books grew out of free inquiry and the Council for Secular Humanism, if you read our journal, nonetheless, we consider ourselves to be a secular movement, not simply an atheist movement. Namely, we're appealing to the large number of people in the world who are secular, who are non-religious. Maybe that better defines us. We're a non-religious movement. And there are many people within the churches. I met a man who says, I'm a Methodist, but I agree with you. And I replied, well, some of my best friends are Methodists. So I'm not going to hold it against you because you're a Methodist. But he shares everything that we say. We have a powerful message of real, and I'll get into that message later on tonight. Well, if we continue, so you see that throughout the world, the movement for a new enlightenment, new education, new appreciation, beyond the religious pieties, beyond the sensational media, an effort to develop public education. And so the Center for Inquiry is interested primarily in public education. We are a think tank, and we do advocate a whole number of things. Yes, and so we're an advocacy group, particularly today, and the great battle, the press release you issued yesterday or the day before, Justin, about the censorship of a book here in Toronto, things like that, we need to constantly oppose. Now, I've been involved in the secular humanist movement for all my life. Someone said, what did you say? Sexual humorist? No, I said, we believe in sex and I believe in humor, but we're secular humanists. I was once visited by the Vice Squad in Buffalo, New York, and he said, what is this, promiscuous books? I said, that's Prometheus books. How do you spell that? Who the hell was Prometheus? That's the amount of education that we have to do. I'm very happy that I've known most of the leading humanists in the world. I was a student at Columbia University, where I took my doctorate a long time ago. And I remember being in the philosophy club, and we invited John Dewey to be present. He was a great philosopher. And this was really thrilling. And he came there. He says, shucks, I didn't think anybody remembered me. He had a standing ovation at that time, but he is remembered, of course. And there were so many others throughout the world. One of the most touching experiences of my life was to get to know Andrei Zakharov, who signed Humanist Manifesto 2. I guess you can pull it off. Who signed Humanist Manifesto 2 when that was issued in 1973. I managed to get that to him by courier. He was placed under house arrest and a battle for human rights. Okay. Humanism has a very distinguished history. Andrei Zakharov was a great humanist and a secularist. And when the Russian tanks invaded Czechoslovakia, he stood in Red Square and said, "Honor the Constitution." And as a result, he was arrested and persecuted for many, many years. When Gorbachev came to power, he released Andrei Zakharov. And I had been involved in the international humanist movement and was very pleased to present him with an International Humanist Award at S.D. Lauder's apartment on Park Avenue in New York. I was very honored, and he said, "Professor Kurtz, I'm very glad to see you, and I'm very honored to have this award." He was there with a thread-worn gray suit, and he had, like Stevenson, holes in the soles of his shoes. He says, "There's one thing I do not like." I said, "What is that?" He says, "Your criticism of religion." Well, I was shocked, because as you know, I spent my life in criticizing religion. But in the Soviet Union at that time, and before, thousands and perhaps millions of people were persecuted for their religious beliefs. And as secular humanists, we believe in the right to believe or not to believe. And that is a human right, freedom of conscience. So I sympathize with Sakharov in that situation. Well, let me say something about the history of humanism. Next slide, please. And of course, one of the key figures is Socrates. I remember a janitor once I showed this, he said, "He sure must be intelligent because he sure is ugly." But he was a great philosopher, a really great philosopher. And he kept alive the spirit of inquiry. Next slide, please. Why don't you bring the whole thing up and we'll go one after the other. And so it's a history of free thought. And this was Galileo Galilei, because he suffered at the hands of the Inquisition and was placed under house arrest. He stands up as a beacon light for the need